Hello, nonprofit rock stars and heroes. This is Tom Check with Greater Impact Consulting, where we help you streamline your Salesforce system for your nonprofit. Today we're talking about automation, and specifically we're talking about one of the three systems that Salesforce uses to automate things, and it's called Process Builder. This is maybe the most user-friendly of the automations. It's visual, you click through it, you don't have to know any coding, you don't have to deal with all sorts of crazy variables or anything like that, and it's all in one screen, so it's fairly easy to understand and adapt as your nonprofit grows and changes. So with that being said, let's walk through what is Process Builder. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Process Builder is found by going to Setup, searching for Process Builder. It should be the only option that pops up. This will take us to a page that shows us all of our current processes, their status, the type, the object they are working on, and the last time they're modified. In order to create a new process, you just click on this little button. You give it a name. Best practices for Salesforce is that you only have one process running per object. So if you want to make automations on your contact object, you would have one process with multiple kind of nodes, as they call them, or different criteria and actions, as we'll see on the next screen. So for this, let's call this account processes. We would give it a description, used for all account processes, and we would start this when a record changes. You can also invoke a process from another process, which allows you to kind of sidestep that one process per object limitation. But at first, at least, I would highly recommend just doing it when a record changes. The next screen is what's called a canvas, and this is where you get to start building the automation. First thing we have to do, I can't select anything else until I select an object. I just click on this and I find my object. In this case, we're going to do an account. And then I have to select whether or not I want this process to fire only when the object is created or when it's created and every time it's edited. Most of the time, I want these to fire when things are edited, so that if an update that my employee makes causes the criteria to be met, then the actions will still be executed. If I make it so that it's only when it's created, if the criteria aren't met on that very first create, then it won't ever fire. So if I hit save, all of a sudden, the next little piece here is opened up, this node, as it's called, or this criteria node. And this is where we enter the things that need to be true in order for the automation to fire. Let's say account has no address. Let's say that if an account doesn't have an address, we want whoever created this record to go ahead and find the address and update it. Conditions are met, or formula evaluates to true are the two that you'll most often use. Formulas are great if you're looking for some kind of advanced things that are harder to do through conditions, but most of the time, conditions are a lot easier and they can do just about everything that formulas can. So for most people, I recommend using conditions. And here, all we're going to say is account address or rather, I'm sorry, let's use account street. And let's say that our org uses billing street primarily. We're going to say is null equals true. What does this mean? Is null just means that it's empty. That's all that means, is that it's empty. Type, Boolean, all that means is a Boolean is true or false. It's either empty or it's not. And then our value is our deciding factor of whether it is true or false. In this case, we want it to be true, saying that billing street is empty, true. We'll hit save. Then we can start adding actions, and this is where your automations are going to get interesting, because you can create all sorts of different actions. You can update the record that created the process to fire, so you can update the original account. You can update records connected to that account, so if they've got opportunities or contacts, you can update those. You can create records, So you could create a task record to let your employee know to go ahead and update this account. All right, we'll go ahead and step through that real quick. Create task to update address. Record type here is just going to be our task. Another really useful type of action, just FYI, is email alerts. If you want to automatically send acknowledgement letters to people who donate when the opportunity gets to the closed won and the acknowledgement status equals needs acknowledged, you can do that. You can also customize it so that it only fires when really specific parts of an opportunity are true. So a lot of times we will use email alerts even to interact with our constituents via email automatically with emails that have our letterhead and our signatures and all that stuff. For our task that we're creating, we want to assign this to the person that created our account. So this is called a field reference. This is a field that is referenced on the account. And I can go in here and I can just start to search for created by ID. That'll give me the user that created this. Priority, normal, status, not started. These are required fields. I'm also going to want to recognize that this is related to an account. So I need to go into, I believe this is going to actually be related to ID. Field reference, again, because this is something we're pulling from the account. And I'm just going to say account ID. And I'm also going to want to add a subject so that the person I'm assigning this to knows what the heck I'm asking them to do. Please update the address for this account. I might also want to add a due date or something like that. Totally up to you. You could say that this is going to be a formula of maybe whatever date it was created, which is today, according to this process. So when the account is created with no address or when it's edited so that it doesn't have an address, plus 7 days. So they've got a week to sort this out. Go ahead and hit save. And that's all there is to it as far as creating an action with a criteria. I can go through and I can create more criterias with different actions. And then I can also tell it to do all sorts of other stuff. A really important thing to know is that the canvas works in order of operation. So this first node is going to be the first thing that it tries to do. If I've got two different criteria, let's say that the account doesn't have a phone number listed. So we'll just set up two basic criteria so that we can show you a couple other important pieces of this. Account phone, and again we'll just say is null equals true, right? So important things to know are that the way that this is set up right now, if the account has no address, that's the first thing it looks at when an account is created or edited. Does this account have an address? That's the first thing. If it doesn't have an address, these actions fire. And right now, the next thing that happens is the whole process stops. So it doesn't look at the phone at all. Now, if the account does have an address, the next thing that happens is that it looks at the phone. We can reorganize these by clicking and dragging, and then we can make it so that the first thing that this process looks at is, does the account have a phone number? If it does not, then it's going to immediately do these actions, and then it'll stop. If it does have a phone, it'll go through the address and see if it's got an address. Oftentimes, we want it to look at all of these criteria in sequence. So where this says stop, we can actually say evaluate the next criteria. Now what will happen is when we create an account, it'll check to see if it has a phone. If it doesn't have a phone, it'll execute whatever actions we build here. And then it'll go evaluate the next criterion. It comes down to this second node and says, hey, does this account have an address? If it doesn't, then it'll create that task that we just designed, and then it'll stop. If it does have an address, then it'll skip these steps and it'll just end the process. So that's how that works. The other important thing is to recognize that you have to activate your process, otherwise nothing actually happens. It'll just kind of sit in draft mode. So I already clicked the blue activate button, and what that does is when I go and I try and edit anything else in here, oops, oh, it's saying I have to actually create an action in order for this to work. So we'll just set this up at a really basic level and have it send a notification to our owner. Right, so now we've got actions under both of our criteria nodes, and now our activate button is blue. As soon as I hit activate, it's going to tell me that it's going to deactivate any other old processes, older versions of this process, and it'll make this one the active one. We hit confirm, and now we cannot go in and edit this information because this is an active process. If we wanted to edit it, what we would have to do is clone this process. Often I just say as a version of the current one, hit save. What that does then is this makes it all editable, and I can really fine-tune my process criteria, my actions, and then essentially again this turns into the draft. If I wanted to make this one my active one, I could then activate it, hit confirm. Now when I go back to view all processes, if I look under my account processes, I now have two versions. Version 2, which we just edited, is active, and version 1, which was the first run through, is no longer active. If I accidentally messed something up on version 2 and I just want to go in and reactivate version 1 because it seemed to work better, I can click on it, I can say activate, confirm, and if I go back to view all processes, now we'll see that version 2 is inactive. You can only delete versions which are inactive. So if you made a boo-boo and you want to delete that version, you have to make sure that it's inactive first. So I know that's a lot to chew on. That is the basics of how to use Process Builder in Salesforce, and it's a real powerhouse for making it so that your team spends less time doing the repetitive tasks that a computer can really easily take care of. Think about what emails do you send out all the time that can be a standard template and fire off based on a specific criteria. Think about when do you want to create tasks for your team to remind them of important parts of a process. Think about when do you want to create updates on the record that you're creating or editing, or records related to that record. So let's say when I update my contact's phone number, maybe I want that, if they're the primary contact, to automatically update the account phone number. That would be really easy to do with Process Builder. Now, this is one of 3 tools that Salesforce has for creating automations. The other 2 are called workflow rules and flow. So those are the 3: workflow rules, Process Builder, and flow. Big picture, Salesforce is putting more of its energy towards flow and very little of its energy towards workflow rules. That's kind of the older Salesforce classic approach to automation. Process Builder is somewhere in between. It's probably not going to be around forever, but it will be around for probably the next 5 to 10 years. What I like about Process Builder and why I think it's a good tool for you to use is that it's so user-friendly. It's intuitive, it's visual, you don't have to know any code, you don't have to understand variables and how to set them and how to update them and that kind of stuff that you get into with some of the others. And it's all in one place. So I can see all of the processes that are happening on my accounts on one screen, one canvas, and I can make the updates necessary to make sure that it is doing what I want it to. Whereas with workflow rules, and sometimes even with flow, it's a little harder to do that because they're in different parts of the canvas area. So that's Process Builder basics. I sincerely hope this is useful in helping you to create a greater impact in your community by streamlining your Salesforce org. Until next time, feel free to reach out and stay awesome. Thanks so much.